You're listening to the American edition of The Voice of Russia. I'm Crystal Park in Washington. The first man to step foot on the moon has died. Iconic astronaut and notoriously private citizen Neil Armstrong died Saturday after complications from heart surgery. He was 82 years old. His death comes 1 year after NASA ended its space shuttle program, and currently the Russian Soyuz spacecraft is the only way to go to space these days. Right now, I'm joined by Sergei Krikalev, who was the first Russian cosmonaut on a shuttle. Sergei, welcome to the show.
Hello.
So, Neil Armstrong was, of course, an icon in America, but also throughout the world, and especially for those in the science industry. Tell us, how does his passing affect you, who you were also a former Russian space astronaut as well?
Well, I think it's a big loss not only for American space program, it's a big loss for all humankind, because especially among professionals, he was very well-known person, and we met several times. And I think for all of us, it's a very big loss.
Well, everyone knows that when Neil Armstrong actually did get to the moon, it was as the commander of the Apollo 11 spacecraft on a mission that was commissioned by President John F. Kennedy at the time. And it was also a historic moment for the United States and Russia, as it kind of ended the space race, if you will, with America getting to the moon. Is there any residual resentment in Russia for that space race?
Well, I think it was competition between countries, and some people called it space race, but also it was mutual support, because something what was launched during Russian space flights became threats for all humankind, and the same happened with the American program. Every successful step was a step that helped us to move forward. And Gagarin's flight in the beginning of 60s and Neil Armstrong's flight at the end of 60s was a big step of humankind.
Surely. And now Russia is the only country that you can that can send things up to space now, after the space shuttle program ended in NASA summer of last year. But so far, the Russian attempts at sending some satellites and other spacecraft into space has not been successful. Why do you think that is?
Well, as every complicated program, we have some kind of high success and problems, and sometimes we have more of one side and sometimes more of another side. But again, returning back to competitions, there was a competition in the beginning of space program, and then together with competition, we had a lot of cooperation, and I was lucky enough to be right in the middle of this. This mutual cooperation in manned space program really started in the middle 70s when Apollo Soyuz program started, and then I was lucky to be first Russian to fly an American shuttle, and now a lot of American astronauts are flying on Russian Soyuzes, and we built together an international space station. So I think all these first steps and even competitions in early days finally brought us to cooperation in space.
Well, recently we heard of the latest American attempt at trying to learn a little bit more about the planet Mars. The Curiosity rover landed successfully and was able to bring back some stunning images of Mars that we had never seen before. What do you think, Sergei, is the next frontier for space travel?
I think the next frontier would be to pave road for manned mission beyond Earth orbit. We had success in unmanned mission to to Moon and manned mission to Moon and then unmanned missions to other planets and even asteroids. I think now the successful mission sending data from Mars will help us to pave the road for future manned mission beyond Earth orbit.
Well, let's focus our attention now a little bit on Neil Armstrong himself. Even though he gained notoriety and fame for his role in being the first man on the moon, he really wasn't somebody who liked all the attention. He felt that he was just an engineer doing his job, and he never really welcomed any of the fame that came along with it. Do you think that helped his personality, or do you think that helped his public image in the Americans' eyes?
Well, it's difficult to spread point of view of one man on all Americans or all humankind, but I think he was really a great man, and I met him several times, and we were lucky to meet on different meetings, and I was actually even part of the ceremony when one of the celebration of moon landing happened even in White House in Washington. And every time we met and talked to each other, I was surprised with how humble is this person, and maybe it helps him to live through all these years of attention. And of course, it interfered with his private life, but I think he found a good balance.
Was he as quiet as he's believed to be?
Well, he was a normal person, and he stayed normal in spite of all this public attention. That's, I guess, the most important part.
Well, Sergei, what do you think it should be the next focus within the space community? During the 60s and during the space race and things, a lot of attention was focused on space. But now that some of these major milestones have been reached, do you think that the space community and industry has something left to prove to the world and something to show?
Well, I think we are going the same way what happened with aviation, when first flights on airplanes was more kind of how to tell. It was something unusual, and finally aviation became part of the profession. It became aviation flight became industrial flights carrying cargo, carrying people, and going actually much further than what first aviators did. Now the same is going to happen with space flights. In very early days, on not very reliable space capsules and space vehicles, people start to investigate space, and now I think next step would be setting some kind of base on Earth orbit, maybe next base on Moon orbit, and then start to go further from the Earth, not only studying but also exploring and using outer space.
Sergei, earlier I mentioned some of the problems and the troubles that the Russian space program has dealt with recently in several attempts trying to get some spacecraft out into space. And since then, Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev has announced a major overhaul of the Russian space program. Do you think that his plans will surely set the Russian space program back on its feet? Or do you think that it needs something even bigger than regulations, or what do you think it might need in order to get itself back on its feet?
At first, I wanted to say that in this risky business of spaceflight, accidents happened. And fortunately, we don't have any. We had these accidents before, even on human spaceflight, both in Russian and American space programs. And we will remember these heroes who was giving their lives to give us opportunity to fly safely and making more challenging problems. Recent problems in Russian programs happened with unmanned vehicle, and I think we shouldn't wait to see if something may happen in manned program. That's why I think some measures need to be done in space program and in Russian space program particularly. And I hope that all this reaction on current situation will help us to continue safe flight of human and maybe prevent any accidents on unmanned flights.
All right, today we've been joined by Sergei Krikalev, who was the first Russian cosmonaut on a shuttle, and we've been speaking about the legendary career and life of Neil Armstrong. Thank you, Sergei, for your time.
Thank you very much.